Does your aquarium look like this? Let's talk about it. Your filter is causing cloudy water. And here's why. Have you got a filter in your aquarium? If so, that's probably a really good thing. Unless you're like I was so many years ago and I was doing it wrong. Picture this. You walk into a shop, into a fish shop, and you browse the fish that they have on their selection, and you scour the tanks looking for the perfect fish, the fish that steals your heart. And for me, that fish was guppies. So you decide that your heart is set on having some guppies, and you go over to the equipment aisle and you spot a 20 litre, 5 gallon-ish tank. It's not big enough for guppies. But yeah, you say, I'll have that tank. And then the employee comes over and he says something about a filter. So you look around at the various different kinds of filters and you say, okay, that one says that it's suitable for my aquarium, so I'll take that one. And the employee says that you can't take home the fish yet because you need to have the filter running in your new tank for about 2 weeks. So you go home with your new equipment and you set it up and you let it run for 2 weeks. Excellent. It was really hard waiting, but you were patient and you waited. And you bring home your fish, you put it in the tank with the filter that's been running for a couple of weeks. But then after a week, maybe 2 weeks, the water gets really, really cloudy. It might be so cloudy that you can't see the fish anymore. So what do? Well, obviously you're going to clean the tank. You're going to make sure that it's not cloudy anymore. So you read the instructions on your filter, on the box that the filter came in, and it says to take out the cartridge and replace it with a new one. But it's not been the month or so that they recommend, so you leave that for now. And you just scoop out the fish and put them in another container for now. You take out all the gravel and you give that a really good wash under the tap or the faucet. And you may or may not use some soap to make sure that it's extra, extra clean. You dump out all that old nasty water that got on really, really cloudy. And then you put the gravel back in and you fill it up with nice clean water. And if you're a clever cookie, you'll even put some dechlorinator in. And then you'll put in your fish. And yeah, the tank looks fine. Spot on. For a couple of weeks. And then it's cloudy again. Why? Okay, so you cleaned it and now it's cloudy again. Nobody said that aquariums would be this much work. So it's been about a month, so you decide to take out the filter cartridge and then replace it with a new one. You wash the gravel again, you remove all the water from the tank, refill it with the clean gravel and the new filter cartridge. And then something comes up in life and you need to go away for the weekend. Maybe it's a wedding that you're going to, or maybe you're going to a friend's house for a sleepover and you're just not there to look after your fish. And when you come back, the water's cloudy again and your fish are dead. Uh-oh. What on earth happened here? What on earth happened? You did the right thing. You made sure that the fish wasn't neglected. You made sure that it was well fed. You made sure that the tank was clean. But it just gets dirty so quickly. What on earth is going on? The truth is that filter cartridges, like the bits that you pull out, I'll put a picture somewhere on the screen. Those cartridges are a massive scam. There's quite a lot of products like that in the aquarium industry, unfortunately. Big companies are lying to you, and every well-seasoned fish keeper has their tinfoil hat on. Because, yeah, these companies are lying. They're lying to pad their bottom line. They want to fatten their wallets. Because how are they going to make money off of you if you don't keep buying products from them? So why shouldn't you throw away your filter media? Well, it's to do with the nitrogen cycle. And don't click away yet. Don't click away. It's fine. It's fine. I know it sounds scary because it sounds like this really chemically element thing. Oh my God, nitrogen. I'm not a chemist. How am I supposed to do this? It's fine, okay? As hobbyists, we don't need to know about nitrobacter and everything. All we need to know is a very surface level. And even then, we don't, ideally, we would understand it at the surface level. But for the average hobbyist, as long as you just know about it and you know what happens, then it's fine. It's fine. So the nitrogen cycle is named as such because it's the process of, well, cycling nitrogen. Nitrogen is found in the proteins that you eat, the food that you eat. And then that nitrogen, the proteins that you eat, they are transformed in the body into waste products, including ammonia. Now, the chemical formula for ammonia is NH3. Do you see that nitrogen in there? The N? It's been transformed from protein into ammonia, and then that ammonia will get transformed into other compounds down the line. But first of all, that ammonia, really, 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 really bad. It is incompatible with life, sort of bad. It's a poison. It really is. If you imagine living in your toilet, sounds gross, doesn't it? Nobody wants to live in pee and poo, urine and feces. Nobody can. It's gross. It's disgusting. It's toxic. It's poisonous. And if you're left to fester in your toilet, surrounded by pee and poo, you're gonna die. It's the same for your fish. But thankfully, it doesn't stay as ammonia forever. The ammonia gets broken down into a compound called nitrite, or NO2 minus, which means that it's got one nitrogen atom and 2 oxygen atoms. You don't really need to know that, but you can see the nitrogen there, that same N there. Nitrite is still pretty bad. It's up there on the badness scale. It's not quite as toxic as ammonia, but it still causes an incompatibility with life. So it's still really important that we get rid of that nitrite. So ammonia is bad, nitrite is bad. So what can we do? Well, luckily for us, that nitrite gets broken down into a much less harmful compound called nitrate, which is NO3 minus. So you can see that N again. And all that means is that there's been an extra oxygen added onto it. But it's amazing how just small changes in chemicals can totally change how they react with the world around them and how they react with us. So that nitrate is a lot less harmful. And if you ask different fish keepers, you're going to get different answers about what the toxic level is. Some will say after 20 parts per million is bad. Others will say after 100 parts per million. And I think the answer is somewhere in the middle, and I think it depends. I don't think it's ideal to have too many nitrates in your tank, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. The main thing is to try and not have them too high. To complete the cycle, nitrates will be transformed into atmospheric nitrogen, although this is really difficult to accomplish in an aquarium such as this behind me. Well, that just about completes the nitrogen cycle. You've got nitrogen in plants or just food, and you eat that food and it becomes waste, ammonia, which turns into nitrite, which turns into nitrate, which turns into atmospheric nitrogen, and then the plants use that for their own growth, and they make the building block, the proteins. Each part of this cycle is controlled by bacteria, and in the aquarium hobby we don't worry about, well, most aquarists, because we're just hobbyists really, we don't worry about the scientific names of the bacteria. I'll put them up here if you really if you really want to know them, but really they come under the umbrella term of beneficial bacteria because they're beneficial. They're beneficial to every single ecosystem on Earth that they're part of, including the great outdoors and your little slice of nature in your tank. Part of the human condition is that we like things to be clean and organised. I mean, I can't survive in mess and squalor. I need things to have some sort of order, otherwise I can't think. In fact, life has gotten a bit chaotic and making it hard to think, but I digress. If things aren't clean, we're typically unhappy. But a sterile environment in nature is a dead one. And when we're introducing an aquarium into our homes, we're introducing a slice of nature. So if we try to keep things so clean, well, that's not compatible with life. It needs to be an ecosystem. It needs to have your bacteria, your organisms that feed upon those bacteria, your organisms that feed upon those organisms, and so on and so forth, in order to build an ecosystem in your tank. I've got tons of stuff in there. You don't see it because they're infinitesimally small, but they're there. So let's go back to your filter. In that scenario, when you took out your filter cartridge and threw it out and replaced it, put a new one in, what you did then was you removed a whole lot of those beneficial bacteria that had started colonising your tank. The water was cloudy because of the waste products that had been built up in the water, like ammonia, and the bacteria that feed on it. Oh my goodness, it was a buffet. So there they were, yummying it all up and multiplying, and yeah, when the bacteria multiply like that, it's gonna cause a big cloud, because bacteria aren't clear, but they're so small that we can't see them. So to us, it just looks like cloudy water. It just looks really dirty. But that was the right thing for the tank in order to begin that cycle. And every time that you messed with it, every time that you took out the filter cartridge, you were restarting the cycle again. So if nitrates transform into atmospheric nitrogen, but then that's really difficult to achieve in an aquarium, what do we do? Well, there are two really simple answers to that question. Because your aquarium is essentially a closed system, it's just a glass box full of water, that waste doesn't really have anywhere to go. We literally change the water through a process that we in the hobby call doing a water change. And I'm not talking about emptying the entire tank and cleaning the gravel and all that. No. Forget all that. Forget all that. That's not okay, because you're killing all those bacteria. What you want to do is just about that much, maybe a little bit more if you're feeling a bit zesty. You only need to change about 20% of the water every week, and other people will have different opinions about that. I have my own opinions about it, but for a beginner, the rule of thumb is about 20% every week. You can use, provided that it's not contaminated with tons of horrible things like heavy metals and things, you can use well water, you can use tap water, you can use rainwater. Some people run an RO system or reverse osmosis, but I've never done that. Personally, it scares me a little bit, which it shouldn't, because you just have a bit of equipment that has a membrane and it filters it all out and you get pure H2O or water at the end of it. But I've never bothered with it, and generally speaking, for most fish, you don't have to bother with it either. So tap water is fine as long as you use water conditioner. Well water is, it depends on where you are, but usually it's fine. Just check it. So as for how much water to change, my opinion is that it depends. Remember when I said that there were two methods of removing nitrates from your aquarium? Well, the first one was water changes, and the second one, plants. That's part of the nitrogen cycle. They'll suck up all the waste products. They even suck ammonia out of the water and nitrites. But they'll do a great job at sucking up your nitrates as well. And they'll use that nitrogen in order to fuel their own growth as part of the cycle. How effective the plants are at removing the nitrates depends on how many you have, what type of plants you have. So things like floaters up at the top, like duckweed and salvinia, redroot floaters, frogbit, water lettuce. They'll take the nitrogen compounds out of the water, the waste products out of the water quite well actually. Your stem plants, like these leggy plants that I need to cut back a little bit, they're fantastic at taking the nitrogen out of the water because they grow so quickly. Your plants like Java fern and Anubias are slower growers, so they won't do as much. They'll still pull it out, you know, they still need to grow, but they don't do as much. You can test for these compounds. There's a few different ways to do it. You've got your electric testing equipment. I don't bother with that. Most aquarists don't bother with that unless you're in like a scientific setting, like a lab or something. They're very accurate, really accurate, but they're really expensive, and for what we're doing here, you really don't need that. A lot of aquarists swear by your liquid test kits. There's an example on the screen. I've used them. I like them. I like them enough. They're not perfect, but yeah, they're pretty good. They take a little while to test with though. That's their main downfall. And also, if you're a new person and you're having to like deal with test tubes and dosing chemicals just right, it can be quite daunting. If you're the sort of person who loves science and chemistry and everything, then you're probably going to be fine. But if you're not so sure about it, it can be really, really off-putting. When I test my water, I typically just use testing strips, and I know people are going to come after me for it. You can come after me, it's fine. We can agree to disagree on this. But yeah, typically speaking, I'll just use testing strips because they're maybe not quite as accurate. But again, in the hobby, typically speaking, you don't have to be terribly accurate. You just need to know a rough estimate, and that will tell you roughly where you are. All you need to know is, does my water have ammonia in it? Yes or no. If it's got ammonia in it, then the bacteria within the cycle needs to build up in number in order to process it. Same with if you've got nitrites in it. A tip that I got from Irene at Girl Talks Fish, somewhere there, shout out, not that you need a shout out, you're very good, is that when you're using testing strips, you can cut them down the middle long ways so that you get double the amount of testing strips. As long as your scissors aren't wet, go for it. So going back to your filter, I know we've been jumping around quite a lot. This is just how my brain works, so apologies for that. Going back to your filter, remember when I was saying that those cartridges are a scam because companies just want to pad their bottom line and fatten their wallets? Well, there's an alternative that you can use. There's a couple of alternatives. So you can get, ideally you want stuff that has a large surface area. Like if you think of your kitchen sponge, I know. If you think of your kitchen sponge, it's really gross. It might not look gross because, I mean, you use it to clean your dishes and such like, but it's disgusting. It really is. Because it's got lots and lots of little holes, that creates a very large surface area. That's how it's able to, or part of how it's able to absorb a lot more water than you would think. That surface area that allows it to absorb a lot of water, that surface area is also a massive breeding ground for bacteria. Just think, it's all lovely and moist, and yeah, there's lots of space. You might even have food particles in there for the bacteria to... Makes you think twice about your kitchen sponge, doesn't it? But the good thing is that those types of sponges can be used in aquaria. You can see, well, over there is my pre-filter sponge. I did a video that I'll link about maintaining the pre-filter sponge. But yeah, it's a bit like a kitchen sponge. It's a lot coarser, so the holes are bigger, because otherwise it's going to get blocked up really easily and it won't work because you can't pass water through it if it's blocked up. But it provides a lot of surface area for the beneficial bacteria to work. And that pre-filter sponge, that's the same sort of sponge that you can use inside your filter. And if you've got a filter that uses cartridges, I wouldn't take out the cartridges in the beginning, but I would put in some coarse sponge, and then that way you're not disrupting the cycle, but you're giving the bacteria a place to grow before you take out the sponge. Before you take out the cartridge, the bacteria can build up on that sponge. You take out the cartridge after about 2 weeks to a month, just to be safe. You know, patience is everything. So you take out the cartridge, you have your sponge in there that's cycled, and then you put in another sponge to replace said cartridge. And there you go. You've got a functioning filter now, rather than one that you have to keep messing about with and changing the cartridge and, you know, that massive scam and killing your fish. So I like sponges. A lot of other aquarists, they like to use, what do you call them? Like your kind of ceramic donut type things. I'll pop them there. And ceramic is quite nice because despite it looking solid, it's actually really porous. It's like a stone sponge almost, where it's not necessarily absorbing water, but it's got a lot more surface area on the inside than a coarse sponge will. So if you're wanting something that's really compact, that'll really pack a punch when it comes to filtering, converting those waste products, then yeah, those ceramic donut things, again, I'll put a picture there. I might put the name on. I'm kind of having a bit of a brain fart moment. Those are a really good option too, if you've got space for them in your filter. They're not the be all and end all. They're nice to have. A lot of people use them. I've got them in my canister filter at the moment because they came with it, but usually I wouldn't bother. I already talked about this in a previous video. I'll put a link to it. Is when you're maintaining your filter, you don't want to use tap water. Like, one of the things that I used to do, story time, excuse me. One of the things that I used to do was when I took apart my filter, I would take it to the bathroom, and I really wanted that sucker clean. So I would get the shower head and I used to put the water on hot and have it on full blast. You know, the jet setting on the shower head. and I used to blast my the internals of my filter, and they were disgusting. You know, there was a lot of solid matter that came off of it. But in retrospect, that was entirely the wrong thing to do. My cycle would crash, and I had the cloudy water problem, and I didn't understand why, because I didn't know about the nitrogen cycle. All I knew was that you should have a filter, and the filter will collect the poo, which it does. But as you and I both know now, it has a much more important job than just doing that. So now that we both know that, we can do better. So anyway, you don't want to do what I did. What you do is when you're doing a water change on your aquarium, you have your bucket, presumably a bucket, any container full of tank water, and you take your filter media and swish it around in there. You might have to do it a couple of times, maybe even 3 times if it's particularly grotty and gross, grungy. Once the water starts looking less like coffee and more like green tea, then it's clean enough to go back in. And even then, do you know, I've had this tank for maybe a year and a half now. It's been set up, and do you want to know how many times I've cleaned the filter itself? and look at it. Totally fine. It looks a little bit green because it's not algae, it's just the light coming through the duckweed at the top, and that's helping to draw the nitrates out of the water. So ace. It's a pretty healthy tank now. It had problems at the beginning when it wasn't as seasoned, if you like, but as tanks get older and they go through the nitrogen cycle and all the life starts flourishing, they do find a balance, which this one has now. Anyway, I hope that was all right. I tried to make it as simple as possible. I hope it wasn't too complicated, because I appreciate that newbies in the hobby and even your seasoned veterans who don't know about the nitrogen cycle and it's just kind of somehow worked out. I appreciate that it can be a lot of information to take in, but to summarise, the nitrogen cycle is just a cycle of waste products. You know, you've got food and pee and poo, that gets changed 1, 2, and then that gets turned into plant matter is food, and blah 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 blah. Okay, it's not as scary as it sounds. Trust me, you're gonna be fine. You're going to be fine. Don't sterilise your tank. Don't sterilise your filter. It is a slice of nature in your home, and nature is not sterile. Remember, if there's a sterile part of nature, it's dead. And you don't want a dead aquarium. You want there to be lots of life. You want the life to thrive. So when you clean your filter, don't go ham on it. It doesn't need it. It just needs to be clean enough for it to be able to continue working. You want that bacteria to have food so that they don't die and they can continue the cycle. So with that, peace out. Yeah, peace out. And if you enjoyed watching the video, if you found it helpful, please consider leaving a like and a comment to say what you found helpful, or if you've got any questions about it. I do really enjoy answering questions, and I'm sure others in the community wouldn't mind answering as well. So there's no such thing as a stupid question at Tam Talks Tanks. We were all beginners once, and goodness knows I've killed so many fish from just not knowing things. So let's do the right thing. Let's ask questions, let's answer them so that people have the correct answers, and we don't propel the cycle of killing fish in the hobby. Let's do the right thing. Thanks very much for watching. Please, again, like, comment, and if you found it if you found it particularly helpful, or you like what you see and you would like to see more, consider subscribing to the channel, because it does help a lot, and it's wonderful. It gives me the warm fuzzies seeing this community grow so much. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! Seals made babies. I can't even speak. I'm so excited. This was a total accident. Wow.